You're listening to the Comic Crusaders Podcast. I am your host, Al Mega, CEO of Comic Crusaders and Undercover Capes. In this show, I'm sitting down with creators from all walks of life to talk about inspiration, process, the lessons they've learned, and a whole lot more. Wepa, what up, mi gente? It's your boy Al Mega. Welcome to a brand new Comic Crusaders Podcast. And today, guys, do have an awesome guest for you guys. This guy is a screenwriter. He's a journalist. He's an author. I mean, you've seen his work in multiple places for sure. He's also a playwright. He has a dope book that's actually dropped today from Fantagraphics called See You at San Diego, an oral history of Comic-Con, Fandom, and the Triumph of Geek Culture. Very long title. We'll get into why in a moment. Let me introduce the amazingly talented Mr. Mathew Klickstein. Wepa, how you doing, kid?
Hey, I'm fine. Thanks for having me on the show, Al. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for coming through and talking about, what you've done, your career, because you've done awesome stuff, and this amazing new book that dropped, by Fantagraphics today. You go get that at your favorite bookstore or Amazon today. You feel me? All right. So, all right, man, a little bit about yourself, because this is Comic Crusaders. We need to have that origin story. So tell us a bit about where you grew up, where you're from, where you grew up at, and how did you fall in love with fandom?
Wow, that's a lot all right there. I could write a whole other book just about that. I'll try to be short, although people know that I normally cannot be. That's why the book's so long. It's 500 pages. So I grew up in Southern Orange County. And before anybody even knew what Orange County was, before all the TV shows and movies, my mom was a dental hygienist. Yeah, she worked at Avon at night. So we had a very different experience in some of the movies and TV shows you see. Like these days, I'm almost kind of embarrassed to say I'm from there, just because it's become a different place to a lot of people because of the movies and TV shows. But that's where I'm from. And then I went to film school at USC, and I worked in LA for a long time out there. Doing film and television and journalism work, all different kinds of things like that. And I just really bounced around, and I've lived in New York. I've lived all over different parts of the country. I've really fallen in love with the Midwest over the last few years. I was working for a Food Network show for a little while after I worked on a book about Nickelodeon that Mark Summers from Nickelodeon was involved in. And he was an executive producer on a show called Restaurant Impossible. He brought me on to help produce that for a few years. That was fun. But I just fell in love with the Midwest, just a little bit slower paced, a lot more reasonably priced for people who are working class creatives like me, freelancers and whatnot. And, I don't have to worry about traffic and all that kind of stuff. So it's been good. As far as fandom is concerned, two different things. One is I just was always into it as a kid. It wasn't enough for me to just watch Looney Tunes. I would be reading books about Chuck Jones and Tex Avery and
How old were you when you're reading these books?
I was young. I mean, I was like 4th, 5th grade. Some of the first adult books I read, not adult like XXX, but adult like for adults, were biographies and autobiographies, even of people who were well beyond my years. Like I was really into George Burns as a kid. I had a Phyllis Diller poster signed to me. I was like 10 years old. It's like the 90s. I have a Phyllis Diller poster on my wall. So yeah, I was just that guy.
I would have appreciated the hell out of that.
It was fun. Even to this day, a lot of my friends are way older because they're the only ones I could talk to about like the Marx Brothers and whatnot, and the Three Stooges. So I was always into that kind of stuff as a kid. And then my dad was actually a super geek, a gamer. He had all the games in the early years, all the Nintendo and Sega CD. He had Turbo 16, Bonk and all that.
Nice.
He was really into it. And he would take me to these little shows on the weekends when I'd visit him. And we would go to those places where it was just warehouses with other people that just had like their trading cards and their action figures and their video games. Like they were little mini conventions that he would take me to.
Cool.
And so I got really into the scene that way. And then finally, I'll say this because it's always really important to me to say, I wasn't really that into comics when I was a kid, but I still hung out at comic book shops all the time because that's where other people like me were. And this was well before social media and whatnot. So when I'm 8 years old, 9 years old and riding my bike around, if I want to go on the weekend to see people and hang out with people that are like me, who read books, who are into movies, all this stuff, they're at the comic book shop. Just because there's tables there where people are playing games and whatnot. I mean, record stores and video stores were cool too. There's nowhere to sit. There's nowhere to hang out. So I would go and hang out at the comic book shops. They were like clubhouses. And, and I would hang out with them and do stuff. So even though I wasn't really that into comics, it was all around me. And we'd be meanwhile talking about movies and TV shows and other books and things that we read. That's where the geeks hung out. And they were my buddies. And so that's how I got into a lot of it too. So it was all those things together really made me who I am today.
Okay, so the comic shop was where you found the tribe. So you're telling me in school it was not cool in school at your time?
It's a really good question. I was in, I don't know if they have this everywhere, but in Southern California, they had something called the GATE program, GATE, Gifted and Talented Education. Actually, a lot of the early Comic Con people did that because they were, Southern California too,
Yeah.
way back in the day in the 60s and whatnot. And so I was with the same group of kids through elementary school and kind of through junior high and high school too, because we all kind of stayed in a lot of the same advanced placement classes and whatnot. So I kind of grew up with this group of kids, many of whom I'm still friendly with to this day. So together we were sort of into that. We all, like, one big thing, I don't know why, but fifth or sixth grade, we all really got into Michael Crichton books. Like Jurassic Park came out, and like all of a sudden it was like a competition. Like everyone, guys, girls, everybody, we were all reading all the Michael Crichton books, and we loved them. And those really became some of the books too that really inspired me a lot and taught me a lot about writing, creative writing. Because again, I'm fourth grade, fifth grade, some of the first, bigger books I'm reading. Of course, that leads me to people like Stephen King and Dean Koontz and some of those guys. Then I get into Ray Bradbury and Arthur C. Clarke, and I start kind of going backwards a little bit to some of those people, Isaac Asimov. So we were all into that kind of stuff together. The other kids at my school and some other people that I'd meet, different sports and stuff like that. Not that I was that into sports and things, not so much. So, if I really want to like hang out with people for hours on end on a Saturday and just talk about movies and certain TV shows and cartoons and stuff, it was the comic book shop for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And just real quick, I did get into Magic the Gathering when it first came out. So I'd be playing the tournaments and whatnot there. Yeah. So my dad got into it. So we'd go and get cards and whatnot. But
were
so
you
that
a
was
killer
also kind of
team?
my scene. What's that?
Did you guys make a killer team? Would you play
No, you know what? We never did tournaments together. That was always kind of my thing. He got really into the online gaming. That was a little bit later. My dad's more than anything as a gamer. I mean, he's all about the computer, for video games and whatnot. But we got into Magic the Gathering together, like, because he was into the artwork and how they were collectible. Okay. And just real quick, I think that's something that a lot of people appreciate about a lot of this stuff too, is you're not just reading the comic books, you're appreciating the artwork. You're not just playing the card games, you're looking at the artwork. There's a lot more to it. So you can be into it because you're a collector, you can be into it because you enjoy playing it. And I think that's cool with a lot of this material, actually.
Oh, amazing. So talk about you taking things serious and putting out your first work ever. When did you do that, and how did you feel when it first came out?
Well, I was writing since I was even younger than what I've been just talking about. I mean, I don't remember ever not writing. People who were
came out with a pen, not to mama.
Yeah, I mean, seriously. I mean, I remember.
You didn't cry.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when my mom would come in and tell me stories, and most of the time she would do it just off the cuff. She would make up stories or whatever. So she was kind of like that too. I would actually like rewrite the stories with her. I would rewrite the stories, and again, I'm like 5-6 years old. So I don't ever remember not telling stories, not writing. I'd be messing around with like different technology that I had with some of my friends as kids. So we'd be playing around with, like, somebody would have a camcorder or even a recorder that we would make little like radio shows about in the garage. We did the whole cardboard box thing. We were all in a Calvin and Hobbes. So we were all, like, a lot of my friends and I at a very young age, we were telling stories to each other and making little short films and radio shows and things. So I was always doing that. And then, I wrote a novel when I was 13, my first novel, which I didn't even think.
Novel at 13.
Yeah. It was 350 pages. It was a science fiction story. I did it just for fun. I really didn't even think about publishing it. I wouldn't have known how to do it back then. There was no place to like post it online or anything. I just did it. And then it just became a summer hobby for me. So I actually did it the next few summers. Yeah. Well, through college, I was writing, I used to just write screenplays and books for fun. And I didn't even really think about doing anything with it, mainly because I didn't know how I would do that. I didn't have any connections or anything. I was in Southern California, but it's not like I knew anybody in Hollywood. One of the reasons I went to film school was to try to meet people and try to get into that world a little bit. And got me in a little bit, but not as much as I would have liked. And I really just had to work my butt off after that. So that at a point, now I'm in my early 20s, it's like, all right, I got to start making money at this. And the journalism was great, and some of the other things I was doing was fun, but it was like, I want to do these books for a living. I want to do these scripts for a living. And that's when things really started coming together. I did a few little projects. And then in 2013, I did my first big project, Slimed, which is the Nickelodeon book that I was talking about earlier that Mark Summers did the foreword to. I talked to 250 people for that book. Everybody and anybody you could ever imagine that was involved in Nickelodeon, the first kind of wave, through like the early 90s. And that book did really well. It was actually, I don't watch Jeopardy. I had to find out about this to all these friends. I swear, you can look it up. It was a clue on Jeopardy just a couple weeks ago. And that book came out almost 10 years ago. So clearly it has some kind of resonance, because that was, the question was about my book, Slimed. And I honestly, I don't even know how that happened. And I was getting text messages and stuff from friends. So clearly that one's gotten out there, and, you know, that kind of thing, which is sort of cool. So, and then from there, I met more people, and I connected, and kind of like with Mark Summers and a few of the other people I met on the Nickelodeon book, I just became friends with people. Excellent. And then I would do other projects with them, and other things would lead to other things. And along the way, I got involved with Mike Reese from The Simpsons. He's one of the two people who's written for that show since it started. We ended up doing a book together that just came out a couple years ago, Springfield Confidential, about The Simpsons. And I kind of kept in touch with people, and I kept working with people, and these projects would come along. And, you know, now we are here with today, See You at San Diego's coming out. So.
Oh my God! Yes, yes. So, what inspired this one? Because, you know, folks, look at this dope cover. Look who's on this cover. Look at that. Royalty.
Yeah. No, it's a fun one. Yeah, fun.
So talk about why you started putting this bad boy together. How was it to meet these legendary people that you have in this book? My God, you have an arsenal of icons and legends in this.
Yeah, look, you know, I have a few other friends that do similar books like this too, like my friend Kasim Gaines, who's actually in this book because he's become a pretty well-known writer as well. He does books on Back to the Future. He just had one come out a couple days ago about E.T., like the official E.T. book, and Dark Crystal and all this. So I had actually Kasim in the book as sort of another pop culture historian to talk about all these movies and things. And, you know, he and me and a few other people we know that do this stuff, you know, we'd be lying if we didn't say that we're also fans still to this day. Yeah, we're professionals, but a lot of this is about getting to meet some of these people, getting to talk to some of these people, in some cases becoming friends with some of these people. And, you know, they're really interesting folks. And it's not just because, they're famous or they've done all these cool things. It's because a lot of them really are great people. They're very smart. They're cool to hang out with. They're funny. They're creative. They're interesting. They've got great stories. Like, I want to hang out with a lot of these people. So a lot of this is about reaching out to those folks and getting to figure out a way. How can I talk to all these different people for a project? A lot of it's just because I want to talk to these people and I want to pick their brain. And so this particular project goes back a while. There's some other things that happened years ago that got me in touch with a woman named Wendy All, who was one of the early Comic-Con people. And we stayed in touch over the years. I've actually never met her in real life. I'm going to meet her. We're doing a big event on Thursday in Los Angeles. We'll talk about that maybe a little later.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's actually going to be the first time I'm meeting Wendy in person. We've just stayed in touch over email and phone and such. And at a point a few years ago, I talked with her about doing this book. And she really liked the idea. She introduced me to a lot of the other Comic-Con people. She told them, this guy's a good guy. He did the book on Nickelodeon, on The Simpsons. He's done all these articles. So I talked with them and became friendly with them. Everything was going great, except for one thing. This was a couple months before March 2020. And I don't know how many people were around in March 2020, but it was not a good time to be launching a big old new project that was going to take a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of traveling around and so forth. So it was like right up to that, we had to really kind of pull back the reins. But honestly, a lot of the people that I was talking to are, you know, in their later years. And I was really worried if I didn't get some of them on record soon, they might not be around. And, you know,
we've lost so many legends just recently.
No, I mean, exactly. I mean, you know, I would have loved to talk to Neil Adams or whatever, but, you know, there were people, you know, I was worried. I really was. So I had to figure out a way. And like, literally I was working with an agent at the time. We couldn't get in touch with anybody at the publishers because they're leaving their offices. They're dragging their computers out and running out and leaving New York. And it was a crazy time. I had a friend at Sirius XM. He was a producer there. And he said, you know, instead of going crazy, they're doing the opposite. They're like, hey, let's take advantage of this time. People are going to need, you know, more content now. They're going to be home a lot more, et cetera.
Yeah.
So he said, we're going to be doing some original podcasts. You want to do your project over here? I said, you know what? Any way that we can get this going, we need.
You mean this project, Comic-Con Begins? So this is the early inspiration for that.
So Comic-Con. So that's what happened was I was able to work with SiriusXM and Stitcher. They just bought Stitcher around that same time, along with a lot of the other audio platforms. They're like just buying them all up right now, like Disney
like Pac-Man, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like Disney or Facebook or something right now. But
you mean Metaverse?
Yeah, man, I was just gonna say Meta. I literally just listened to the Zuckerberg podcast with Rogan. You know, not that I normally do. You know, I just was curious. But anyway, So I was able to have, frankly, the funding and the technology and the support from other producers and such to do the project as an audio documentary series with SiriusXM. And it really was just a matter of we can't stop, we can't slow down. Because there was a lot of discussion of, well, if we wait till October, maybe this will die down and then we can try to do this book and all this. I said, no, like we can't wait those months. Plus, I was already really invested. I'd spent a lot of money on getting books and watching documentaries, and I'd already talked to all these people. It's like, man, I'm not stopping now. Like, this has already been a lot of work and a lot of time. Like, I need to, be nice to get a couple bucks for myself, and I need to get this project going. So we did it as the audio documentary series, Comic-Con Begins, which I highly recommend. It's its own thing, but it's still, something I really highly recommend, like I said, and you can listen to it for free anywhere on any audio platform. Even though we work with Sirius, you can hear it anywhere. But for doing that, I collected about 70 hours of original interviews with all the different people. And
70.
Yeah, 70. And the podcast
That's an
series,
editing nightmare.
it was a lot of work. And I had a great team at SiriusXM that helped me to cut it down to the 7 hours that we have for the audio documentary series. For those listening closely, it's 7 hours. I had 70. So you do the math. And I said, you know what? We still have so much great stuff in here. There was a lot of this whole subjects we didn't even get to talk about, because we just didn't have room for it. And luckily, a lot of the people who were involved in the podcast series really wanted, to do more and wanted more stuff to come out. They're like, yeah, let's keep going. You did a great job. Let's see what else you can do, kid. And so Ho-Che Anderson, who's in the podcast series and now also in the book, he's done a lot of graphic novels like the Martin Luther King Jr. one and a few other big projects. He's done a lot of stuff for Fantagraphics. And Stan Sakai, of course, the Usagi Yojimbo fame, also known as the nicest guy in comics, because it's true. He also has done a lot for Fantagraphics, and they knew I was thinking about maybe going to Fantagraphics with the book still, just because I really like Fantagraphics. They're kind of part of the story. Yeah, and it's just like I was worried if we went to Simon & Schuster, Penguin, or some of the other bigger publishers I worked with before that have their own advantages and such too. But I was worried that a book like this would get buried over there. I'd get kind of sidelined. It wouldn't be the project that ultimately ended up coming out. But with Fantagraphics and Gary Groff, the publisher, I knew they would do it right. And so Ho-Che and Stan Sakai went to Gary and said, you got to listen to this podcast series. You got to do this book. This guy's legit. And Gary agreed. And that was last September. And then we just, went right into it. I mean, we were working through the holidays. We had this genius designer that Gary brought on, Jonathan Barley, who I can't recommend highly enough, Barli. Go to him for all of your book design needs. That guy's amazing. I mean, we're literally Zooming with each other while people are on vacation. I mean, it was literally Thanksgiving, holidays, whatever. I mean, we had to
get a turkey leg in your hand. Like, hold on.
Exactly. No, it was really like that. It was really like that. I mean, it was nuts. I mean, we really were just like, working through it, and it was a lot of fun. And so I was able to I was able to insert a lot of the material that we just didn't have room for in the podcast series, or the podcast series would have been, 50 hours or something like that.
Yeah.
So we were able to do it with the book. The other thing, obviously, that the book has, that the podcast series, of course, doesn't have is all the pictures. Because I was working with Fantagraphics and I knew we had this genius designer with Jonathan Barley, I said, we can really do something here. And we got over 400 pictures and art. Most of it no one's ever seen before. I mean, there's a picture stuff, dude. Yeah, really cool stuff, like sketches. We got like John Pound's early sketches of Garbage Pail Kids, and we got pictures of all these different celebrities at Comic-Con, people you wouldn't expect to see there, like Frank Capra, and just really crazy people. I mean, one of the pictures, one of my favorites, is this picture of Francis Ford Coppola from 1974. I mean, it was right before Godfather 2 came out. I mean, Godfather 2 hadn't even come out yet. And someone had that in a box as a negative, mislabeled. It wasn't even labeled. They were going to like throw it away. And then they luckily looked at it with a microscope. They told me this. And they were like, this hasn't even been processed yet. So when you're looking at that picture of Francis Ford Coppola at Comic-Con in 1974, you're some of the first people ever to see it because it's not been out. And this is what happens. I mean, these things just get lost.
You got exclusive stuff in this beautiful book, because I'm reading it, folks. Yes, it's 500 pages, so, and I'm at page 47. But I've already seen some awesome pictures and already seeing the narrative you're going with here and the stories of these people from those early days. I mean, I'm already past the point where they met with Jack Kirby. And talking about, what should we do here? So we do incorporate everything. What do you think? And he comes off like, hell yeah, do it all. So there you go. It's Jack Kirby's fault that the Comic-Con is the way it is.
Yeah, no, Jack Kirby, and that's why he's on the cover. Jack Kirby was definitely like the spiritual guide of the group. They had a few others that were pretty cool too, that we can't discount, like Ray Bradbury, who went to every single Comic-Con until he passed. Forrest Ackerman, who's the creator of the famous Monsters of the Film.
Those stories with Forey, like what a apparently great man, just helping and being so generous with his time and
I mean, so it was, they had that, and that's the thing too, is one thing a lot of people don't think about or realize is these were kids who were putting this together. Barry Alfonso was 12, and
and a cab. I mean, his mama was driving him to the meeting.
Their parents, most of them, their parents had to drive them around. Most of them were not even 16 yet. And again, you can read about the book. They were not getting coffee for people. They were not hanging out outside and giving out flyers. They were creating and running the con. This was made by kids. It really was. A lot of them, got out of it when they went to college because they left San Diego. Like, so a lot of their stories kind of stop when they go to college because they were all kids when they were doing this. And through a couple of older guys like founder Shel Dorf, who was the old guy at all of 36. He wasn't even that old.
Right?
he knew some people, and a guy who owned a bookstore that they hung out with named Ken Kruger knew some people, and some of those people happened to be Jack Kirby and some of these others, and they connected these kids to this kind of generation of the original geeks, the original fans, like Forey Ackerman, like Ray Bradbury, creators like Kirby. And so they became kind of like mentors to these kids. So these kids were already wanting to do it and getting going. And then they were just lucky enough to be connected to these people that happened to be Jack Kirby. And you're right. They would ask Jack Kirby for really important advice, like, should this just be about comics or should this be about everything? And Kirby was the one who said it should be about everything. And as we show in the book,
Kirby, well, Shel says no, but the way it's written is like it was enthusiastic.
Shel, anyone listening or watching this knows the story at all. They know that Shel Dorf was an interesting character. We actually have both an entire episode of the podcast just about Shel, and because of that, an entire chapter in the book just about Shel. And I really wanted to give everybody opportunities to say what they felt about Shel, because he really is a Citizen Kane type of a character. I mean, he really is one of these people, or today, like an Elon Musk or something, or even someone like Stan Lee or something, where have a lot of respect. A lot of people, really believe in a lot of what they did and who they are. But there's definitely a lot of haters out there too. And, maybe rightly so. I mean, there were definitely a lot of people who had some things to say about Shel that, don't look too good. But, there are also a lot of people who love Shel and who respect Shel for what he did. And everybody, and this is, I think, the real point, even the people who really did not like Shel at all agrees that without him, there wouldn't be Comic-Con. So even the people who did not like him agree that he was the guy. And so, and that's what's fun about the story too, is it's not just a bunch of random disparate anecdotes of people rambling about whatever, like I'm doing right now. It was all kind of put together with all these different storylines, because there were really interesting people like Shel Dorf involved, who, again, not everyone might know his name, but he's pretty much considered the founder of Comic-Con. And he was an interesting guy who did a lot of interesting things and made a lot of people mad and made a lot of people happy. And there's just stories like that through the entire book, and he's not the only one. I mean, there were a lot of people who, didn't exactly endear themselves to everybody. I mean, everyone knows there's crazy people in this industry, in this world. And especially it was, again, the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. So there's a lot of extra stuff going on too. Yeah. A lot of craziness going on behind the scenes also. So.
Yeah. See, this is why this book is fun. I like how it's put together. It's well put together, with the conversations and all. Great job, kiddo. Because again, I was thoroughly engaged that when you popped in, like I told you in the green room, when you popped in, I jumped scared for my life. I was just so into the book when I heard that pop. Oh man, Mega don't jump, but that made me jump. Klickstein made me jump with that click.
Yeah.
But I'm digging it, folks. Listen, it dropped today. Seriously, all right. It's from Fantagraphics. Go to Fantagraphics website or your bookstore. You go to Amazon, whatever you got. You got to get this today. All right. I mean, what was your most favorite story? If you could tell us within, what popped off in the book. Do you have a favorite, time?
Yeah, no, for sure. My favorite is just because it really shows, again, the connection between what was going on at Comic-Con at that time and what else was going on in the country, which, that's one of my favorite parts of this story, is that it wasn't just kids. It was kids during, the 60s and the 70s. And there was so much going on outside of the scene at that time with Vietnam, and with stuff that was going on with protests, and with stuff that was going on with new technology, with computers coming into the game, and stuff going on with all this political things going on, and Woodstock, and the way that music was changing, and the way that film and television was starting to change. I mean, and that was all impacting a lot of these people. Not everybody. Some people felt like Comic-Con was a bit of an escape from all that. But a lot of the people in the story, they were definitely very impacted by what was going on in the rest of the country, especially since a lot of it was going on, in San Francisco and Berkeley, not too far up, just a few hundred miles up. I mean, it wasn't across the country, it was right there. And they'd come down, a lot of the underground comics guys would come down from San Francisco to sort of teach the San Diego kids, hey, this is what's going on up there. Yeah. We're fighting for some real causes up here. There's some crazy stuff going on, and we're making comics about it and whatever. Spain Rodriguez and Gilbert Shelton and people like this, Trina Robbins. And so that's all going on at the same time. So for me, that's a really interesting part of the story. And the best kind of specific story that shows this is in 1975. Timothy Leary, Dr. Timothy Leary, the acid guru. He was called by Richard Nixon the most dangerous. Yeah, he's called the most dangerous man in America. Richard Nixon calls him. Had just gotten out of prison that happened to be in San Diego. Connected with some of the Comic-Con kids by a wild coincidence. They were both at a radio station at the same time. The Comic-Con kids were there to talk about Comic-Con happening. Leary's there with his probation officer. He's literally just getting out of prison. Really? Wow. And there too. And they invited him to come, and he came. And we actually do have, for those who don't believe it, a picture in the book of Timothy Leary, the programming director at the time, David Scroggie, who would also go on to do a lot of stuff for Dark Horse, and George Clayton Johnson, who was a whole other crazy character that could be a whole other book. It probably will be one day. There could be a documentary on George Clayton Johnson, sci-fi guy, and wrote all these books and did all these other stuff. I can go on and on just about him. But I mean, really? They made stuff like that happen at Comic-Con, and how Timothy Leary got there, what he did when he did get there. Wendy All, the woman I talked about earlier, who helped me get into all this, she actually went to dinner with him and had kind of this crazy adventure with him as well. And then they all went and hung out by the pool, and they did what you did back in the early 70s when you hung out by the pool, and all that. So they're all having a good time together and chilling. And, and just the fact that stuff like that went on at Comic-Con, I think would really surprise a lot of people and make people realize that those connections were very real. And when you think about it, it makes sense because, I mean, look, Crumb has artwork on a Janis Joplin album, and you had so many other rockers at the time who were really into comics, and comics were talking about the music, at least the underground comics were, and there was so much connection to what was going on there. In fact, I've said for years that a lot of movies and things about the 1960s and 70s tend to leave that out, that so many of the people who were in all these different social movements and what was going on with comedy at the time and music and such, like you look closely at some of those pictures, people are reading comic books or they got t-shirts. I mean, you look at the Ramones sometimes, Johnny Ramone's got like a Popeye shirt on or whatever, or Rocky and Bullwinkle. I mean, like the people of that era, the 60s and 70s, Grateful Dead, even the Beatles, all these different people, I mean, they were into this stuff and they were talking about it and they had pictures. So it's like, I wish that more movies about the 60s and 70s would show that. All these people were watching these science fiction movies and reading these science fiction books and reading these comic books, who would go on to do all these major things in our society. And even today, you know, I bring this up sometimes, especially when people ask me, and we can get into this in a minute too, you know, when I have someone like RZA from Wu-Tang, you know, did afterward, I'll just say real quick, like, there's a lot of connection between the hip hop community and comics and science fiction.
Absolutely.
You know, whether you like him or not, I really enjoyed the Kanye West documentary that's on Netflix right now. And I mean, he's wearing like a Blade Runner shirt, like a good, clean one. Like, he wants people to see that he's into Blade Runner. And he's talking at one point kind of crazy Kanye West style, but about Deadpool and how he feels like he's like Deadpool. And I mean, he's making references through the whole movie. You watch that Elvis movie that's out right now. I mean, he's all into superheroes and stuff and has like the lightning bolt and the cape. I mean, all these different innovators from all these different places, especially in the 60s and 70s, I think, more so than you would think, were into this stuff. And, you know, now we're seeing that more today. Now everybody's into it. But, you know, I think that that's really cool. So that's why I really like the Timothy Leary story, because it shows that there was stuff like that going on in Comic-Con. You know, and I think that's really interesting.
We had some really cool, wild dudes.
Yeah. I mean, they were really, you know, they wanted Hunter S. Thompson to come to Comic-Con. I mean, a lot of them were into Hunter S. Thompson. They wanted him to come. I mean, they wrote him a letter and invited him, and he ended up not coming. But I mean, they really wanted him there. And, you know, even when you think about some of the people themselves, I mean, Harlan Ellison, you know, who didn't come until a little bit later, but he did end up coming a couple of times. I mean, that guy was into so many different things and was into so many different worlds and, you know, hung out with so many different people. I mean, he was like a rock star, you know, with his glasses and, you know, and his pipe and all that stuff. I mean, the guy got around and, you know, was a bit of a Casanova and all that. I mean, a lot of those people became like these counterculture figures. They became almost like these like underground superheroes themselves. And I think that that's really cool and says a lot. I mean, even someone like Rod Serling of the Twilight Zone, and Twilight Zone was a big part of all this too. And all the Twilight Zone people and people like Bradbury, who wrote some for Twilight Zone. I mean, you look at some pictures of Rod Serling. I mean, that guy was cool. You know, you see him by the pool chilling, you know, chest of hair and all that. The way, you know, like even when you watch him do his intros of the show, I mean, that guy was like, he was like talking like he's, you know, sitting there like Miles Davis or Jack Kerouac or something. And that probably was because he was into all that stuff. I mean, he was obviously into the cool hip stuff that was going on at that time. And, you know, and so it imbued him, you know, the way he would talk even for something like Twilight Zone that you would think, you know, is sort of like, you know, sterile or for, you know, a square kind of a person or whatnot. But then you really watch, you're like, no, there's some cool stuff going on. Even some of the music, the camera work. I mean, no, it was pretty funky. It was pretty, you know, there was very jazzy, very bebop. It's like, no, when you really watch it, when you give it a chance for people who maybe haven't really watched Twilight Zone before, like, it's not what you think just because it's a bit older and black and white and all this, like, Rod Serling, the people who worked on it. Yeah. And Richard Matheson, all the people who worked on it, like, they were cool people doing cool stuff and into cool things. And so they put that into the show. I mean, it really is in that, you know?
Absolutely. So talk to me, how did you even get RZA to do that?
Oh man, that was a lot of work. That took a year and 6 representatives. Yeah, man. Look, Mark, you know, again, bringing it back to Summers. Mark Summers once said something to me that I always appreciate. I'm sure a lot of other people, including in this book, would agree. Which is, you know, he one time said to me, "Matt, you're a real pain in the ass, but in a good way." And I've always felt that's the best compliment I've ever gotten from anybody because I don't let up. I mean, even a lot of the other people in this book, it's like it took like just so many emails, so many phone calls. I mean, there were certain people I just really, really wanted and needed, and I wasn't going to let it go. And, you know, it even goes back to, I hate to put it in these terms, but it's true. I feel this way. You know, it goes back to like the collector mentality. It's like, I got to have the whole set, you know, like I got to have them all.
I need the whole run.
Yeah, I need the whole, you know, series. You know, I really want it all. And like I said, I originally wanted RZA actually for the podcast series. So that's when I first got in touch with his people. And yeah, I was going through all these different assistants and managers. And because I've worked in Hollywood, because I am a journalist, because at this point I've been in all these places around the country, I've done these other books, I have a nice network of my own. You know, I actually don't really mess around with social media stuff. It's not really my bag. I see it as a little distracting and whatnot. So I don't really use social media for any of this. I know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody usually, or I have different ways of getting in touch with different people. And so I've just always been really good. It's like being a private eye, and I've always been very good at that. I mean, even the Nickelodeon book, way back in the day. I started that around 2011 before it came out in 2013. I mean, there really wasn't social media back then. And I mean, I just had to find these people, and some of them weren't famous anymore or whatnot. So they didn't have like agents or publicists. I had to go friggin' just find them. And, you know, and I did that for 250 people. So I've gotten really good at knowing how to do that. Anyway, so I'm in touch with RZA's people. I'm trying to get him on board for the podcast series. And really, I just wanted to talk to him about that connection between the hip hop community and science fiction and comics, because I thought that would be an interesting angle. I also wanted to talk to him really, of course, about the martial arts stuff and the Bruce Lee stuff, because that too might surprise a lot of people, that there was a lot of interest in Bruce Lee and martial arts movies. And Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris was another one. He was a special guest in 1975. That's pretty early on that they had them come out. So I wanted to talk to him about that. It just wasn't working out. We weren't able to get the timeline, but I kept bugging him. Finally, I hear back about a year later that they have some time, you know, that he can do it. We can do a Zoom. And I said, well, the podcast is done and it's been out, but we're doing the book. Can I talk with him and maybe we can kind of work on putting together an afterword for him? And they said, sure. And that's what we did. And I swear I was going into this, and RZA's been a long time hero of mine. That was another thing. I was really into Wu-Tang.
I'm a Wu fan too.
Yeah. You know, it was, Wu-Tang forever. And, it's like cash rules everything around me. I was definitely, I was into it. And I actually have a Calvin and Hobbes shirt that's also a Wu-Tang shirt. It says Wu-Tang for the children. But anyway, but I'm sure Bill Watterson loves that. Not that I'll ever know. But the point is, so I really wanted RZA in there. And, also a big fan of his movie stuff and all that Jim Jarmusch and Ghost Dog. I mean, I'm a big fan. And so, like we said before, part of it was I really wanted to talk to RZA. This was a way of doing it. And so they set up the Zoom and we did that. And I just wanted to talk about martial arts stuff and a few other things. He just starts going on and on and on about Gene Roddenberry and Jack Kirby and all these other just really intricate, meticulous things that are in the afterword. And at a point I actually said, hey man, do you consider yourself a nerd? Like, are you a nerd? Like, what's the deal here? And he goes, actually, I just wrote something about that for Wired that'll be coming out. And now he has this graphic novel coming out, the Bobby Digital graphic novel. And I mean, he's into it. Again, he's a real deal. He's not just, I'm a celebrity and now this is hot, so I got to talk about this. Like, he's into it. And he clearly had a lot to do with his inspiration artistically on all the different projects he does. So I was so happy to have him in there. And just to have RZA's name on the cover of my book, I mean, I know some people that are getting it just for that, and his afterword really is so good. Like, it came together really, really well. I'm really proud of how that came together and how we put it together in the book and the picture of him. And so, if nothing else, if you're a big Wu-Tang fan, get this book because RZA says some really cool shit.
But you could always tell that Wu was into comics early on because there was a lot of comic book references in the lyrics, even early on, that comic book fans, Tony Stark's, Johnny Blaze, you know what I mean?
Totally.
So,
well, and also, not only that, but also just the idea of, and this was something I always kind of implicitly felt even when I was younger, before a lot of this was talked about more, was just the idea of like, they almost have like double identities or secret identities, the way a lot of rappers and people in the hip hop community have, these sort of monikers that they use. And a lot of times they have these qualifiers and, even in their lyrics, and the titles of their albums and so forth, they're always kind of referencing these things. And so I always kind of caught on to that. And I'd love seeing that even in, like I said, like other music genres you wouldn't necessarily think about, like in the punk world or whatnot. I mean, a lot of people probably don't realize this. I don't know if you necessarily call Radiohead punk, but, there's lyrics in Paranoid Android that are straight out of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and even Paranoid Android itself is Marvin the Paranoid Android. And so, you wouldn't necessarily think of a band like that, especially at that time, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Like, Hitchhikers is kind of this nerdy, geeky thing. Radiohead's really hot and cool and at the top of their game and all this stuff. And so for them to put that into a song, it was like, oh, so it's really cool when you see these connections like that. And that was a big part of why I wanted RZA, not just in it, but, to have a big place on the cover. Like, we're going to go some places you might not all consider. And I want people to be like, wow, what's RZA doing in there? What's he have to do with all this? And it's like, read the book and check out, find out and see how there's so many different angles and so many different kinds of people and stories and such. I didn't want it to just be kind of the usual suspects. You know, I mean, we got those guys in there too, just in case. You know, got to get to Kevin Smith, got to have him in there, got to get Neil Gaiman, got to get him in there. Felicia Day, that was cool, and all that. But I mean, I wanted to bring in a few surprise guests that you're like, oh, what's so and so doing in there? What's up with that?
Oh, yeah, you definitely have that. You got some names in here. Again, you know, I can't wait to keep, you know, chugging through it because, you know, you got me hooked like a fish. Fantastic job. I'm definitely going to go ahead and mark this up. You know, it's free, folks. Comic-Con begins on your favorite audio platform. Got to tune in. It's some awesome stuff. Yeah, but it's the book right here, Fantagraphics. All right, today. Go visit Fantagraphics like right now, or go to Amazon, or go walk along to your, you know, bookstore if you need that. You know, it's a beautiful day. Why not?
Yeah. And if you do, I'm sure most people know this. It really helps us out a lot. If you do get it on Amazon, please write up a review.
Yes.
The more reviews we get, it helps out with things like the recommendation algorithm stuff and all that. So it just helps to engage, you know, that kind of stuff more. So I always like to support my local bookstore. I always like to tell people to support your local bookstore, your local comic book shop. They really need it. It's one of the reasons why I like to do touring and stuff, even though a lot of people don't do that kind of thing anymore because it's not really cost effective. But for me, it's fun and it's a way to meet a lot of people. And I really believe in supporting independent businesses and particular, because like I said, I mean, that's where I grew up, you know, and I used to love to go to independent small bookstores, little used bookshops, even to this day. You know, luckily my wife's into it too. It's like something we like to do.
Hey, you are
like,
lucky.
yeah, no, she loves it. I mean, we just like, we'll be driving around somewhere on a road trip or whatnot, and we'll stop at, you know, a little bookstore and just walk around a little bit, maybe buy a couple things, get some gifts for some family. That's actually what I get for gifts for people for the holidays usually is books. I like to get, especially used books, like books that, you know, people wouldn't necessarily know about and whatnot. So some older books or some rarer books. And, you know, so yeah, sometimes I know it might not sound like a lot of money, but sometimes I spend a little bit of money on it because I'm getting like a, you know, $75 out of print book for my dad or something like that. But that's what I like to do. So I want to support that ecosystem. That said, it definitely helps us a lot to, you know, put reviews on Amazon. You know, I have my druthers about Amazon like we all do. I mean, you know, talk about a guy who looks like a super villain. Bezos does a good job of that. But the point is, if you do get it on Amazon, please do a review because it helps us out a lot.
Yeah, get it done. Get it done. For give them that review. Listen to that awesome 6-part audio series on your favorite audio platform today. It's called Comic-Con Begins. Mathew Klickstein. You don't mess it up again. It's about this book, though. Again, let me read you this wonderfully long title that he decided, right? So, see you at San Diego, an oral history of Comic-Con, fandom, and the triumph of geek culture. Yeah, triumph. I see what you did there with that Wu-Tang joint.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was actually on the phone with Gary Groth when we were talking about the title of this book, and it just was in my head. See you at San Diego. For some reason, I really like the sibilance of it, and I like the tautology of it. What's funny, I didn't even think about this. If you go to my website or on Amazon or anywhere else, you look at my books. A lot of my books start with the letter S. Like a lot of them do. Really? Slimed. I just did a book with another lady called So You Need to Decide. I did a book called Selling Nostalgia. You know, there's a few others that start with the letter S, or the letter S is very prominent in the title. So I guess I just really like S's. But see you at San Diego. And it's funny because, of course, you know, I've actually had to tell some people, not see you in San Diego, see you at San Diego. It's like, we're not going to the city. We're going to like the place of mind. You know, it's like, we're going to be at there, you know, we're not going to be in it. We're going to be at it, you know, like there's just something a little different. And you see that's sort of the clarion call that a lot of people say, see you at San Diego. And so I thought that would be cool. And then we were talking about subtitles, and this one just kind of popped out, and he was like, I really like that. That's really good. And I said, right. And so especially the Triumph of Geek Culture, that's probably my favorite part. I will say, and this is actually kind of important for people who, you know, if they've gone this far, they're probably already into this, but just in case, a lot of people have told me, oh, I'm not really into Comic-Con, or I'm not really into comics. So in a way, I kind of wish I called it something more like First Geeks or Fandom with an exclamation point, because for me, what's really important that people understand about the book, and you're seeing this already, Al, as you're reading through it, is it really is not just about Comic-Con. It's not just about comics and comic culture. In fact, there's stories that go all the way back to the 1930s, years before Comic-Con even started. And for me, it's a book about pop culture nostalgia. It's a book about fandom. It's a book about geek culture. It's the oral history of all of this. And I wish I could get that message out a little bit more, because I think there are a lot of people who are missing out on the book because they're like, oh, that sounds cool, but I'm not really that into Comic-Con. Because I've even heard that through friends of mine that I know, and I'll actually tell them, like, but you're into Star Wars, and you're into Star Trek, or you're into Twilight, or you're into Rick and Morty, or you're into, it's like, are you kidding me? Cartoons, movies.
See you at San Diego. It doesn't say, Comic-Con. It's San Diego.
Yeah. So I just, or even, even beyond San Diego, it goes to Berkeley and San Francisco and New York and other places even around the country. In some of the later chapters. I mean, it's, even the organization's now called Comic-Con International. And I think that's the point too, is that's what Comic-Con is. It's like, it's almost like a shame that Comic-Con will, it certainly doesn't hurt them, but Comic-Con has never just been about comics. It's always been about all of pop culture. It should have been called Pop Culture Con or Pop Con or something. And a lot of comic conventions, quote unquote, over the last few years have changed their names to things like Pop Culture Con or Pop Con or, Fan Con or something like this, for that very reason. And so I'm saying this because I want, more people to really think about the book or maybe check it out, who maybe would be like, oh, there's other stuff in it that's for me.
Yes.
But also because that's really is what Comic-Con was always about, all of it, all the stuff. I mean, if you are a fan of something, I even told Gary at one point in the beginning, our publisher, I said, we should do like a special contest online when the book comes out. If you can name like a geek culture, shibboleth, if you can name a geek culture like fandom thing that's not mentioned in the book, you get a free copy. Like, and I really worked hard to, like, ultimately with some cuts and things, like there are a few things we had to take out just for, otherwise it would have been 10,000 pages. But there was a point early on where I was really proud of the fact that at least just name dropping, like, Battlestar Galactica or Babylon 5, or even really random things, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, whatever. It's like, I was really proud of the fact that if you are a fan of something, we probably at least mention it once in the book, if not have a whole larger story about it. So, I mean, that's really how I feel about the book and about Comic-Con itself. And anyone who's been there knows that it's true. It really is everything. It's everything. I mean, there's nothing that's not represented there.
Absolutely. Okay, folks, there you go. Thank you so much for your time, kiddo. Look, actually, wait, one more thing. There ain't no time yet, because you did mention you're doing a signing.
Oh, that's right.
Where and when is this signing? So that we.
So it's actually, I know in 2022 it's pretty rare. I'm actually doing an entire tour. We're going all over the country. We're even hitting up Toronto and Canada. I wasn't able to make it to the East Coast this time, but I'm hoping.
I was about to ask when you come to New York.
Yeah, no, we'd love to do some stuff in New York, Baltimore, Atlanta. In fact, I'm good friends with Lloyd Kaufman from Trauma. He's also in the book, and I'd love to do something maybe with some of his people.
I'm gonna chill with him on the 15th of this month.
Lloyd is great. I just talked to him this morning. He's going to help get the word out about the book. Lloyd's fantastic. Some great pictures in the book from the Trauma people, by the way, including some old Trauma guys, like James Gunn and stuff like that. Some of the more obscure ones. But so we got the Trauma representation in the book for sure. But the point is, starting September 8th, Thursday, I'm going to be in LA. We're going to Skylight Books in Los Feliz, over by Silver Lake area. We're doing a signing there, and then we're going right up the street to the American Cinematheque. There's a movie theater there where we're going to show Scott Pilgrim versus the World, great geek culture movie. And then we're having a panel afterwards with a bunch of the people from the book there talking about all these different kinds of things.
Oh, nice.
Then 2 days later, I go up to San Francisco for the Cartoon Museum with Trina Robbins and Steve Lee Aloha.
What? You're going to meet Trina in person?
Yeah, no, Trina's going to be at our event. Hey, man, we're going to be in San Francisco. I got to have Trina Robbins. And then from there, I'm going to be all over the place. And I'm telling you, wherever we go, we got special guests. Tim Seeley's going to be at one of them.
What?
Barry Alfonso is one of the co-creators of Comic-Con. We got all these different people doing stuff. We're going to movie theaters. We're going to record stores. We're going to bookstores, comic shops, museums, colleges. We're going to be all over. So if you want more information on that, you just go to my website. We got the full list of all the places I'm going to. And hey, by the way, we do want to get to the East Coast maybe in the spring, but if there's any places that you want us to come to, and can help us get there, because, I'm putting a lot of this on my credit card. I'm not a rich man. But if there's people who want us to come by, and
Oh
you can hook that
man,
up, I'm happy to try to make that work.
there's some local shops here in Brooklyn that I'm pretty sure would appreciate
that
that.
would be really fun. Yeah, for sure. And, I'd love to go to, definitely New York is on the list, of course, for in the future. Forbidden Planet would be cool. That's where we'd probably do something maybe with Lloyd, because he's there a bunch.
Nice,
yeah. Forbidden Planet would be cool. Or even something with the colleges. Because, that's the other thing too, that I want to really make clear. And it's been great because some of the reviews have already been talking about this. The book is a lot of fun, I hope. And there's some great pictures in it, but also it is a textbook. It is a resource. It's an encyclopedia. There's no getting around it. I mean, I made it that way. I wanted to be that way. As I said earlier, some of these people are not going to be around much longer. When people are writing PhD theses on this kind of stuff, when people are teaching classes on this kind of stuff, when people, want to spread, the stories of these things to the next generation, I mean, this is the book to do it with, because this is not my speculation. This is not my analysis. This is not, what I think about these things. These are the people themselves. That's why I did it as an oral history. It quite literally, for people who've never seen or read an oral history before, it's like a talking head documentary, kind of like what we're even doing right now, but with like 50 people. And then I cut it together to create a full story. So it's not just a bunch of interviews. And so it's got the best of both worlds, where it's just the raw stories. I'm not in it. There's no me in here at all until the end of the book, when I thank people and whatever. But the actual book is these people just talking and me cutting them together like it's a documentary. And that's, by the way, very much how we did the podcast series too. In fact, I don't even really like calling it a podcast series. That's why I call it an audio documentary series, because it's like a documentary, except you just hear it. And so, for me, I think this book is really important for that reason, because as we talked about a little earlier, there's some people in the book that not a lot of people might know about, or they might not know their names, or might not know that much about them. And this is a way not only to teach people about that, but to give these people the legacy and the credit and spotlight they deserve. And I know we got to get wrapping up here, but just a really good example is B. Joe Trimble. She is somebody that a lot of people might not know her name, but if you are into Star Trek, you got to look her up, or you got to get our book and read about her and see pictures of her and read her talking about how she really was instrumental to getting Star Trek fandom going back in the day. I mean, she's one of the people who helped to bring it back after it got canceled after season 2. And if that hadn't happened, and it's really in large part thanks to her. She gathered together 25,000 fans. You'll be reading about this soon now. It's coming up soon. But she gathered 25,000 fans. 25,000. P.S. No computers, no social media, no internet. It's the late 60s she's doing this. She had
the OG influencer.
Yeah, exactly. OG influencer for sure. She had to fundraise just to get enough money for the postage stamps and the envelopes and things, because she organized a group of fans, 25,000 fans, to tell the network, hey, we want Star Trek back. It really is probably the first time that fans organized to bring back a TV show. Now that kind of stuff happens all the time. You see all the hashtags, Snyder cut, whatever. This was probably the first time that something like this happened ever. And then B, if the show hadn't come back for season 3, it wouldn't have been syndicated. We probably wouldn't be talking about it right now, because we're not talking about Time Tunnel, Came out around the same time. And so, there's some reasons for that too. Time Tunnel wasn't as good a show, but still the point is B. Joe Trimble made that happen. And look, let's just say she's not going to be around much longer, and people should know more about her and know what she did and who she is, and how she even talks about how she did it, why she did it. Can be really inspirational to other people who might say, hey, let's get that Batgirl movie back, or let's do, let's get season whatever of this show, or whatever, I mean, Bijo made that happen by herself almost with, she brought the fans together, but she led that group, and 25,000 of them. So that kind of stuff is in the book. And I think those are the kinds of stories that need to be told in classes and at, in thesis papers and news, whatever, all these different, documentaries and stuff, because so that's really important to understand too, that this book is a textbook as well as being something kind of fun and cool to look. You can just look at the pictures and have a good time. You'll enjoy it. You can flip around and read some different stories, but if you really get into it and you teach a class on any of this stuff, or you're writing a thesis on it, or you want to write your own book, or you're doing a documentary, this is definitely the book you need to get. And I think that's going to happen. People are going to kind of catch wind of that in the next couple of months or maybe a couple of years. Sometimes it takes time to get around, but
Yeah.
I think this is going to be one of those books that people will be talking about kind of using for other things. And that's how I did it. That's why I did it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I can say it without too much arrogance. I mean, I know it's a little arrogant, but the reason I say it is because again, it's not me. I didn't really write it. I just did the interviews and then edited them together. So it's not my stories. It's these other people. I just did what I could to help give them a platform in this great way so that that information can get out there and so that people can know who B. Joe Trimble is and know more about Trina Robbins and know about a lot of these people who deserve a lot more spotlight. And I hope we'll get it because of a book like this.
Did you get any of this on video?
Yes, I did actually, because a lot we really were doing most of the interviews like the height of COVID. Like we were literally like, there's no vaccines yet. Like nobody knows what's going on. I mean, maybe one day I could do a book about just making this. Like this has been a crazy ride. I can't believe
a book about the book.
Yeah, I can't believe it's September 6th, 2022 right now, my man. Like I've been waiting for this moment for 3 or 4 years now. It's like nuts. Wow. It's been a crazy 3 or 4 years, like all the stuff that's happened, But a lot of the interviews we did over Zoom, which was still kind of a new thing at the time. So I recorded those. So yeah, we actually have some video of some of these people talking with us, and it's pretty.
You're talking clear. Documentary, but you're talking about documentary. I think if you have it, you could even present it in that Zoomish format.
Yeah, well, I think something like this, we can do it one better, and I doubt any of the people I'm working with or whatnot are going to hear this far or whatnot. I can't say too much, but let's just say I've done the podcast and I've done the book. And the book is going to be an audiobook, by the way, also coming out soon.
Okay. Oh, excellent.
But let's just say we've done everything except the documentary. So
yeah,
that's definitely on our radar. We've done all the other things. So hey, you never, stay tuned, kids. Stay tuned.
Please. Manifest.
I can't say anything yet, but let's just say that.
All right, but let's just say that if I would just say that if this were to happen, I would be so happy. I'll be one of the first ones all over this, like white on rice.
Yeah,
I would love to hear these stories and see the reaction, their facial expression as they tell. Because I mean, that's a lot. There's so much you get from the writing, but this, when you see them visually and their reactions, you know what I mean? There's also element of hip hop, and when you were talking about the connection of hip hop, and comics, basically that's what his show is all about. All right, that's my boy Reno. Shout out.
Cool.
Yeah, so I wanted to say thank you so much for your time, Matthew.
Thank you. Absolutely thanks for having me on,
Alex. Awesome. Your book is amazing. So far again, I couldn't put it down. I read I'm up to 47. Don't you worry, I'm almost there.
Yeah, and I apologize, everybody. I know it's late in the game to say it, but I'll say it now. You can see on my name tag, my last name is spelled wrong because I'm telling you how poor I am. My keyboard, the I doesn't really work on my keyboard, so I think I accidentally left the I out because I'll press it and it doesn't go. But so it's Klickstein. It's spelled correctly on your,
right
on your
there,
thing. Yeah, everywhere else.
I'm looking at mine, double checking now.
Mine was wrong, but that was my fault because literally the I on my laptop doesn't work very well. So this is not the first time that's happened. Actually, I'll look at my name and be like, "Oh shoot, the I's missing."
Yeah, and a big shout out to the boy Cliff when you were talking about Magic the Gathering cards. He himself says it definitely was about the artwork and whatnot. Top notch, and you can see by himself just for the art, and they're having a whole conversation now. He never played, but he has a massive amount. That's just funny.
Yeah, no, it's true. The artwork on that stuff is just great. I know we got to get going, but I knew a guy, super rich guy in LA. We went to his house and he had this huge mural of him and his friends looking like they were in the Dungeons and Dragons world. He was rich enough. He was rich enough. He got like one of the main Dungeons and Dragons artists to do it. Like he actually, it was done by like a Dungeons and Dragons, like one of the main guys from that day. He was a bit of an older guy. But
I would make that a card and then have a curtain in front of it, and when I'm if I'm playing and then I just pulled out that curtain, now everybody loses. The card is out.
Yeah.
All right. So again, everybody, pick up Matthew's book. It's out today. again, you can go to Fandom Graphics website. You can go to Amazon. And again, if you do it on Amazon, you better leave a review.
Yeah, leave a review, even if it's bad. I don't mind if it's bad, but leave a review. The more reviews, the better. Hopefully, it's a good review. But we need to get those reviews going. It helps out with getting stuff moving along in the Amazon system. Got to play the game these days, like video games. So we really appreciate it.
Absolutely, and it's actually check, not check. I really do sound like a Puerto Rican. Check Mathew. So check out Matthew's website at Mathew Klickstein. That's Mathew with 1 T, not 2 folks. All right.
It's spelled that way on my birth certificate, not an affectation. It actually is spelled that way.
My social security guard, they wrote Alexander with an S. Alex in excess.
Wow.
You know?
Wow.
Yeah, so I was like, I could have gone as excess, Xander, whatever, Sander. There you go. Check out Matthew's 6-part audio series on your favorite podcast platform today. It is called Comic Con Begins. You will not regret it. Trust you me. And again, thanks to everybody. Sixth Element, thank you. Even he knows the book sounds super interesting. So do a rewind on the show if you haven't watched it, because it definitely is a hella interesting book. All right. It really is the business. All right, folks. So you know what to do. Check out Comic Crusaders at comiccrusaders.com. Check out the extended family over at undercovercapes.com. You know what the deal is, all right? And again, thank everybody else for tuning in. And again, please support, creators like Matt doing amazing stuff. I mean, there's so much more we could get into, and I think I'm gonna have to have him back on so we can talk about even past work.
Happy to do it.
He's a legend. That, just like he's talking about these guys that you don't know about, really, but he's doing the same thing, man. He's doing the same thing, man. He's a young legend right here. So again, thank you for your time. Much appreciated. Hasta la próxima, mi gente. Wepa! Thank you for listening to the Comic Crusaders podcast. If you like the content, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Also, please visit comiccrusaders.com and our extended podcast family over at undercovercapes.com. And also, make sure to download the Comic Crusaders app on the Google Play Store today.